Bob is an ordinary man at first glance, living in a small northern town and working at a lumber mill. His ex-family, his wife Darlene and daughter Eva, live far from him. Their relationship is strained. The girl has reached a troublesome age, behaving oddly and completely ignoring her mother. One ordinary day, Bob returns home and receives a call from Darlene, who complains about their daughter and asks him to influence her. However, Bob asks to be forgotten and ends the call abruptly. Yet, he is deeply upset by Eva's behavior, and to relieve some tension, heads to a bar where he soon notices a dealer. Later, they meet on the street. The young man tells him that his boss, Nelson, is in need of couriers. He remembers Bob from his NHL days, especially a famous fight Bob would rather forget. The man cuts off the young man's enthusiasms and buys some goods, dismayed by the rising prices. At work, Bob goes to inspect one of the malfunctioning blocks of the crusher. He climbs up to the machine and stares inside as if he wants to step into the blades. His grim thoughts are interrupted by a co-worker's voice, and Bob abandons the frightening idea. Later, Bob tells his boss he needs a few days off, packs his things, and goes on a trip. However, on the night road, he suddenly feels very ill. Racked with pain, he loses control, and his pickup veers off the road. Barely recovering, Bob calls Nelson and then reaches a roadside cafe, where he immediately heads to the bathroom, startling patrons with his bloodied face. Overcoming pain, Bob washes the blood off his hands, which are already bandaged, and then examines his side. It becomes clear that a piece of his skin has become invisible, making his internal organs clearly visible. Bob bandages himself with towels and returns to the dining area, where Nelson soon arrives. The dealer agrees to tow and fix his pickup, in exchange for which Bob will have to serve as his courier, especially since he is heading in the needed direction. Nelson admires his hockey talent and confesses he still watches his old games. He tries to offer support, but Bob cuts off his attempts to befriend him and reluctantly agrees to become a courier. Nelson brings Bob home, then heads to a dump frequented by bears. This time, he shoots one of the animals and guts it on the spot. In the morning, Nelson delivers to Bob a container with the animal's organs, which are to be sold on the black market. The pickup is already repaired, and Bob sets off. He reaches his ex-wife's house late in the evening. Darlene lets Bob inside and informs him that Eva is staying over at a friend's. In the morning, Bob prepares to meet Nelson's contact, who runs a repair shop in town. At that moment, Eva appears. She is happy to see her father, but feels hurt when he refuses to take her with him. Bob drives to the shop, where the owner's employees greet him with a search, but the owner recognizes the former hockey player. He warns that working with Nelson is dangerous and advises thinking about the future. Nevertheless, he hands over the package for the dealer. In noticing Bob's unwell appearance, he gives him a Chinese remedy he gets from a local store. Later, Bob returns home. Eva also notices that her father is feeling unwell, but he brushes it off as Rib's injured at work. Suddenly, the girl asks about the diagnosis of her grandfather, Bob's father, who had died long ago. The man explains that his father voluntarily left this life because he had some issues with his head. After the conversation, Eva runs off to her friends, but on the way she stops by a Chinese pharmacy. The seller is very welcoming and even suggests visiting a doctor who is available right there in the next room. Even when the girl refuses to buy anything, the seller gives Eva herbal tea to improve her skin. Later, Eva meets up with her friends, who suggest going on a tour of an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Although Eva's friend doesn't want to go, Eva insists on visiting more than anyone else. They wander around the creepy rooms, scaring each other with possible ghost encounters. Eva confesses that her grandfather was once a patient there, whom she never knew as he died before she was born. She hopes to find old documents and learn his diagnosis. The group descends into the basement, where they are frightened by a figure in a white sheet, but on a closer look it turns out to be just a pile of rags. However, Eva's friend in terror grabs her hand, tugs at her sleeve, and sees a transparent hand. The girl gets even more frightened and runs away from Eva. Meanwhile, her parents recall their years together and Eva's childhood pranks, like when she went to school on her own at the age of 6. In the morning, Darlene discovers that Eva didn't spend the night at home. She, her friend, and Bob begin to search for the girl, but she's neither at the hospital nor the police station. Darlene goes to the station to file a report, and Bob starts investigating his daughter's belongings. He finds her phone and reads a chat with friends about the planned excursion. The couple goes to Eva's friend's house, but her father says their daughter isn't there. Later, Bob calls Nelson and reports that the delivery will be delayed. The dealer is very displeased. After this, Bob finds Eva's friends. They act provocatively and the man loses control. After a scuffle, a boy admits they were at the psychiatric hospital. Bob realizes she was looking for her grandfather's data. At the same time, Eva regains consciousness in an iron cage. Meanwhile, her parents drive to the psychiatric hospital and enter the still functioning part. The security tries to stop them from entering, but Bob gets into a fight and collapses from severe pain. The chief physician comes out, who remembers both his father and Bob well. She asks Darlene to leave her husband in the clinic as he is not well. Bob remembers himself as a little boy in the same corridor. Later, he argues with the doctor, who calls what happened to his father a tragic accident, as he saw it all himself. The woman confesses that his father wanted to die to hide his illness from others. He was very afraid for his family. Bob immediately remembers how his father asked not to show him to his son. The doctor reminds that she couldn't stop the disease, but she protected the man. She shows the room of his father from where he watched his son's life and offers Bob to stay in the clinic. She will study his illness and provide all necessary care, but Bob categorically refused. Nevertheless, they lock him up. However, at night, he wakes up to the sound of an opening door and sees that the way is clear, and a bunch of keys to the clinic doors is on the bedside table. Bob dresses and leaves. He arrives home, but Darlene isn't there. Only her friend is going crazy with worry for the missing ones. Then Nelson calls again and starts threatening Bob, listing his family members, which drives the man over the edge. Hearing his swearing, Darlene's friend tells him that girls have been disappearing in the town for a long time and demands that something be done. He goes to her friend's house again, and this time he manages to meet her. The girl confesses that she now knows her friend's secret. She is the same as him. She hands over Eva's backpack that was left with her. Bob examines it and finds a package with Chinese tea in the same packaging that he himself received from the owner of the workshop for Nelson. He goes to the man and asks questions about the missing girls. The man is offended. Despite his illegal activities, he is a father and grandfather and would not kidnap people. He tells about the Chinese pharmacy. Meanwhile, unknown people examine Eva, probing her wounds, causing the girl to cry. Bob finds the pharmacy and tells the seller about his missing daughter. The woman is scared, but afraid to tell the truth. Then Bob notices Eva's bicycle in the back of the shop. He removes his hood. The woman is horrified, seeing his disappearing flesh, and she realizes that the girl is just like him. She tries to protect the doctor, glancing towards his office. Realizing this, Bob rushes in that direction, stripping off his clothes along the way. He descends into the basement, finds the doctor and his assistant, and starts beating them, demanding his daughter back. Then he hears Eva's voice calling him from a cage. Seeing what her father looks like, Eva is scared, but Bob calms her down and opens the cage. But the doctor manages to wound him. Bob leaves with his daughter. As a parting gift, the seller gives him tea that will help Eva and advises them to run. Father and daughter arrive home. Darlene immediately begins to provide help. It turns out she knew the father's secret and knows what to do. She couldn't confess to her daughter because she was afraid for her. In the morning, Bob regains consciousness and tells his daughter that he had to leave because of the illness. Eva confesses that she quit sports when she started having the same issues. She thought she was alone in this, but it turns out that her father and grandfather also suffered from invisibility. Later, Bob prepares to leave, although Eva doesn't want him to go, but the man confesses that his strength is leaving him, and soon everyone might find out his secret. He says goodbye to Darlene as Eva appears at the doorway with bags, intending to drive her father home herself. Through tears, the mother agrees to let her go. Father and daughter set off. Along the way, Eva starts asking questions. Bob admits that after what he experienced in childhood, he couldn't burden his family, so he left. The daughter promises to make up for everything they missed in their relationship. Soon they arrive at the place where Nelson's new courier is waiting. Bob needs to meet him, but he notices that his face is also beginning to disappear. Eva covers the void with foundation, and the father goes to the meeting. He delivers the package passed by his boss and returns to the car. Soon they reach Bob's home, and the father hands over the tea he got from the Chinese lady to Eva. She brews it and cares for her weakened father. He assures her that she can live here peacefully. People in the north don't meddle in each other's affairs. Meanwhile, Nelson opens the package and finds that he has been deceived. Eva goes shopping, and the dealer notices her. Later, the girl tries to calm her father, who has become almost invisible. And after a while, he suddenly says that it's time for him to go, because later he simply will not be able to accomplish what he planned. He is ready to disappear at the sawmill, which he had already tried to do. Despite her objections, Bob drives to the factory, but standing over the crusher, he suddenly stops. At this time, an armed Nelson bursts into his house. He threatens the girl with a shotgun, demanding to know where Bob is. Even though Eva says that he sold the house to her, the man realizes it's not true since Bob's belongings are still there. He accuses Bob of dishonesty and decides to take it out on his daughter. Suddenly, something throws him away from Eva. The girl realizes that her father, who has become completely invisible, has returned and is using this to beat the villain. Bob demands that he leave his family alone, but misjudging his strength, kills the dealer. He confesses that he could not leave his daughter a second time, and now he will always be with her. Later, they dump Nelson's body at the dump, where a bear finds it. Eva buys herself tinted glasses, sits in the empty car, and talks to her father, who advises her to drink her magic tea, as it helps. And he confesses that back then, when she was 6, he secretly followed her to school. Also, his father had told him that he did not want his son to see him like that, and he always thought his father meant death. But then, who pulled him out of the psychiatric hospital? Eva immediately remembers the white figure from the basement, smiles, and suggests talking to her grandfather. The seatbelt buckles the void, and father and daughter set off. An unusual Canadian horror film, shot amidst the harsh northern nature. A mix of genres ranging from action to thriller and horror, plus a bit of sentimental drama. All this captivates and compels one to watch the film to the end, although initially, it seems quite gloomy.